Welcome to the We Rise podcast, where we are building collective resilience. I'm your host, Christine Gyovai, business owner, wife, mother of two, paddleboarder, and I love working with communities across the nation. Join me as I share stories and strategies to inspire action to build resilience and community transformation. From the Navajo Nation to the mountains of Appalachia, incredible work is being done by community members and leaders. I'm excited to share more on the podcast today. Welcome. Greetings. Welcome to the We Rise podcast. I am so glad you're here. I'm excited to focus in today's episode around rising and resilience in Central Appalachia. In this episode, we'll look at some of the historic mining wars and the Battle on Blair Mountain in West Virginia, ways the coal mining industry is shifting, and how communities are creating lasting change. We'll wrap up with the story of growing solar in Southwest Virginia, which is providing new avenues for local economic development and meaningful federal investment. Enjoy. My grandfather, my grandpa Joe, was born on May 18th, 1918 in Blair, West Virginia. My grandpa Joe was a coal miner until he was paralyzed when slate fell on his back in the 3-foot seam he was mining. Even though he was in a wheelchair all the time I knew him, I remember him as strong and independent. He didn't act like he was handicapped in the slightest. He had hand controls on his car and he drove everywhere. He had a boat and went fishing, and he gardened and grew enormous zucchinis. And he was fun. There was always a line of grandkids waiting for a turn to ride around in his lap while he did wheelies in his wheelchair. I never heard him complain, but I know through family stories that times were tough and that mining took a steep toll on my grandpa's mental and physical health. My grandpa Joe was 3 years old in 1921 when the Battle of Blair Mountain was fought, which is the largest labor uprising in U.S. history. In August of 1921, just over 100 years ago, over 10,000 coal miners answered the call of the United Mine Workers of America, the UMWA, and marched to end the mine guard system, which kept the coal fields in a police state, supported by a private force of armed guards. At the time, 8 in 10 miners lived in coal camps or coal company towns and were paid in scrip, the currency of the coal company, to buy groceries and other goods at company stores. Miners were marching for better working conditions, a decent wage, union representation, and safety regulations. Mary Harris, Mother Jones, helped rally miners for the Battle of Blair Mountain, and in time, the UMWA became the nation's most powerful labor union. James Green wrote in The Devil is Here in These Hills that a U.S. district attorney named Mother Jones the most dangerous woman in America because she could, by her own words and deeds, persuade hundreds of men to walk out of the mines. The striking miners were Eastern European immigrants, Southern Blacks, and from local mountain communities, all marching and organizing together, not at all common at the time. The Battle of Blair Mountain raged for 4 days until the miners laid down their weapons, refusing to fire at the federal troops which had been brought in to fight them. Although it took many years, ultimately several policy changes stemmed from the Battle of Blair Mountain when workers' rights to organize were included in the National Industrial Recovery Act in the 1930s. Now, 100 years later, many of the same core issues are again topping the headlines. In a February 2021 New York Times article, Emily Badger wrote, "The big theme of West Virginia historically is that our wealth and our income is not here. It's taken somewhere else," said Sean O'Leary, a senior policy analyst with the West Virginia Center on Budget and Policy. "That leaves us with very little to grow and invest and work on ourselves." In the 1870s, West Virginia created a legal system to separate land ownership from mineral rights. The result for families that own land with coal underneath was that profits traveled out of the state along with the coal, usually mined by out-of-state coal companies. The coal industry developed a strong, powerful presence, with their interests often intertwined with those of elected leaders in the state. To this day, West Virginia still does not have the same kind of sustainable permanent fund that enables some other states to return resource wealth to their residents. Kelly Allen, the executive director of the West Virginia Center on Budget and Policy, said, "The honest answer of it from our perspective is that West Virginia and Appalachia deserve an outsized piece of any federal recovery policy." Jennifer Granholm, who was confirmed as Secretary of Energy by the Senate in early 2021, said in a Washington Post interview of the Biden-Harris Interagency Working Group on Coal and Power Plant Communities and Economic Revitalization, the whole goal of this task force, as well as the focus on environmental justice, is to make sure that 40% of the benefits of clean energy investments go to communities, like in West Virginia and other places that have been left behind or disproportionately negatively infected by pollution. We want to make sure that technologies like carbon capture and sequestration, geothermal, hydrogen are deployed. And these communities are the perfect place to demonstrate how these technologies can be used to get to our goal of net zero carbon emissions by 2050. So we're really excited about bringing jobs to these communities. Now, looking at the numbers is really quite remarkable. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the number of estimated oil and gas extraction jobs fell from a high of 600,000 in March of 2017, just 4 years ago, to roughly 160,000 at the end of 2020. Coal mining jobs slipped below 50,000 in 2020, down from 92,000 in 2012, almost half. Fossil fuel jobs are often concentrated in rural areas where the economy is largely based on fossil fuel extraction or processing. The National Association of Counties summarizes the interconnected systemic challenges now facing coal communities in their 2017 project report, Stronger Economies in Coal-Reliant Places. The report says coal-dependent communities and regions face major challenges. A variety of market and technological forces have combined to reduce the demand for coal, creating major obstacles for communities that have relied on coal as an economic driver for generations through mining, transportation, or energy production at coal-fired power plants. Changing conditions in the coal industry resulted in devastating job losses across coal communities, with the lion's share 87% of these job losses occurring in the Appalachian region. Well, the decline in coal employment in Appalachia has been an ongoing challenge for nearly 2 decades. These trends became even more pronounced in recent years as Appalachian counties experienced a loss of 23,000 coal jobs from 2011 to 2015. The decline in the coal industry has also affected ancillary industries, retailers, and other businesses that were dependent on the coal industry and its workers for their businesses. Furthermore, declining coal shipments also generate lower tax revenues, leading to major shortfalls in the funding for municipal needs, infrastructure, and schools. As a result of these new economic realities, local leaders have been tasked with retraining displaced workers and developing new economic engines. Simultaneously, they've had to cope with a complex mix of social, environmental, and economic concerns, including talent retention, development, environmental contamination, and healthcare, that greatly complicate their ability to help affected workers, businesses, and local residents. And that's not even to talk about the challenges that communities are now facing from the global pandemic of COVID-19. The lives and economic options for workers will only become more distressed as fossil fuels continue to be phased out due to environmental concerns. The challenges affect workers and many more people than just the workers in mines or power plants. According to the Just Transition Fund, a philanthropic group focusing on coal communities, for every direct job lost in mining or in a power plant, a community loses 4 indirect jobs. That's so many. A report from the Political Economy Research Institute at UMass Amherst indicates that the U.S. oil industry is expected to decline by 20% in the next decade and by 95% between 2031 to 2050. By 95%. The natural gas industry will begin its decline of 75% between 2030 to 2050, and many agree that the coal industry will never come back. Though coal used to generate at least half the electricity production in the United States, today that number is at 20%, according to the U.S. Energy Information Association. Surprisingly, electricity generation from renewable energy sources in 2020 is also at 20%, according to the EIA. Building collective resilience looks different in different places. What stories and strategies inspire you? Share your ideas with us on social media and check out our website at yeswerise.org to find the show notes, interview videos, and the links mentioned on the podcast today. Eric Rosenbaum wrote in a January 2021 CNBC piece on Biden's climate change plan and the battle for America's most threatened workers. Survey data from the Yale Program on Climate Communication finds that the majority of the U.S. public is in favor of financial support for fossil fuel communities. When asked how the government should spend revenue from a potential carbon tax, 72% of registered voters said that assisting workers in the coal industry should be a priority. Only investment in new technologies and infrastructure spending had higher response rate. Yale's survey work shows widespread support from registered voters in the U.S. to create jobs for coal workers and oil and gas workers, jobs permanently shutting down mines safely and shutting off abandoned wells, with 83% of voters that they support creating a jobs program that would hire unemployed coal workers to safely close down old coal mines, restore the natural landscape, as well as a jobs program that would hire unemployed oil and gas workers to safely close down thousands of abandoned oil and gas wells. A carbon tax is the most obvious big ticket way to pay for these jobs and also make additional investments. But the legislative outlook is difficult to assess given decades of efforts ending in failure. There are estimates as high as $100 billion a year that could be raised through a carbon tax and spent on a variety of purposes, including the reclamation of fossil fuel sites and workforce development. The Biden-Harris administration enacted a series of policy changes and executive orders during the first days in office, including rejoining the Paris Climate Accord, canceling the Keystone XL pipeline, and ending fossil fuel subsidies. Opponents of these changes cite the number of jobs that will be lost, and it is true that jobs will be lost. There will be significant loss in the transition away from fossil fuels, and it will be a monumental task. However, additional jobs and benefits will also be gained. Though the transition will be difficult, it is something that can be done. We have the knowledge, the capacity, and ability to support fossil fuel workers and communities through this transition toward a resilient future, and we need to start today. Transitioning economies from fossil fuel extraction to a just and equitable future looks different in different places. Instead of a one-size-fits-all approach, programs and policies must be envisioned at the regional scale and be reflective of local places and people. Change is the most successful when it is created based on the local ideas of local leaders. New partnerships and networks of cooperation across regions are needed to create sustained change and prosperity, often with the long-term support of an anchor institution or organization. Communities are working together to create brighter futures in new and innovative ways. From the new Colorado Office of Just Transition to worker-owned solar cooperatives in Central Appalachia to labor unions and environmental groups working together to create national economic transition. Collaboration is leading the way to a resilient future in fossil fuel communities at a scale that has not been seen before. Solutions that offer a sense of hope and possibility are leading the way. The story of solar in Southwest Virginia is a strong example of this economic transition. Just a few months ago, 2 new bills headed to the governor's desk in Virginia. These bills are the direct work of years of work of the Solar Workgroup of Southwest Virginia, which our firm, Dialogue and Design Associates, facilitates. Appalachian Voices is one of 3 co-conveners of the Solar Workgroup, along with the University of Virginia's College at Wise and People Incorporated, a community development financial institution. After years of work in community building, the bills include the Brightfields Act, which creates a grant program to promote renewable energy development on coal mine sites and other brownfields, and power purchase agreements bills, which ensure that schools and local governments in Southwest Virginia have access to no money down financing and federal tax incentives for solar. When we started the Solar Workgroup of Southwest Virginia in 2016, the region had already experienced a significant loss of coal mining and related jobs. During that time, people often thought of coal as an either-or proposition. You were either for it or against it. People felt like a choice had to be made at that time to either support mining or solar, but not both. The Solar Workgroup was careful to take a both-and approach around solar, and public perception has changed over time. In 2017, the Solar Workgroup hosted a solar fair at the University of Virginia's College at Wise, drawing over 200 people. The banner that was printed to hang behind the stage of the solar fair, where musicians played and Boy Scouts spoke, said, "Proud of our past and excited for our future, powered by the sun." That was intentional language. It was a direct recognition that coal has put food on the table for many families in Southwest Virginia, and that heritage is something that people are proud of. At the same time, many know that coal is a dwindling resource in Southwest Virginia, and there aren't many jobs left. Taking an honest look at the pain and where the future is going in Southwest Virginia requires acknowledging the loss that people are experiencing, while also keeping eyes about the possibilities on the horizon. Just yesterday, Appalachian Voices was awarded $1.5 million by the Appalachian Regional Commission to catalyze commercial and institutional solar projects for coal-impacted communities throughout Central Appalachia. The award is part of a $46 million package supporting over 50 projects through the Power Initiative. Power targets federal resources to communities affected by job losses in coal mining, coal power plant operations, and related supply chain industries. This is the largest power grant package to date, in large part due to the regional collaboration that has enabled groups to work together to dream and acquire the needed tools, resources, and investment to create change. Communities are working together to rise and create resilience at an unprecedented rate. Many people are being deeply inspired from the incredible work happening across Central Appalachia because the work is truly transformative and it is creating change. I'm excited for the future in Appalachia and beyond as communities rise and lead together. Thank you for joining the We Rise podcast. To learn more about the stories and speakers featured in this episode, check out our website at yeswerise.org. You'll find the show notes, interview videos, the links mentioned today, and you can join our email list. Subscribe to the show to catch every new episode and leave us a review or a rating. You can also find us on Facebook or Instagram at Collective Resilience We Rise to share your ideas. The Collective Resilience We Rise podcast is produced by Dialogue and Design Associates, podcasting for creatives with music by Drishti Beats. Thanks so much for listening.